Good evening, members, and welcome to our Planning Committee meeting. Can I welcome our two visitors to our meeting? Good evening to both of you. And can I welcome anyone watching on YouTube? Item 1, apologies for absence. I have apologies for absence from Councillor Monday, and he has not nominated a substitute, so he has no substitute. Item 2, declarations of interest. To declare the existence nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest relating to items on the agenda having regard to the Code of Conduct from members. No one. Oh. Item 3, minutes of the previous meetings. I have the minutes of the 14th of the February and the 7th of March. I would take them individually. Does any member have anything to say about anything on the 14th, or does anyone wish to move them as being a correct item?
Move as a correct record, Chair.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor. Thank you. All those in favour of them being a correct? Thank you very much. Now we come on to the minutes of the 7th of March.
Move them as a correct record, Chair.
Thank you. And does it have a second? Thank you. All those in favour, I sign them as a true record. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 4, public question time. We have no general questions. Those people wishing to make a statement will make their statement prior to the application as we've discussed it. So that brings us to item 5, planning applications. The first application is 5A, application 220346 full, Toppersfield Hall, Great Yeldon Road, Toppersfield. And I do have a speaker for this item. Can I invite Mr. Dave Osborne, who is the applicant, to the table? Good evening, Mr. Osborne. You have 3 minutes to make your statement. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is David Osborne. I am the applicant and owner of the business Lifestyles that occupies the premises at Toppersfield Hall Farm. We are importers and distributors of clay roof tiles, natural slate and clay bricks. All these materials are used extensively in the local area, particularly on historic and listed buildings and small residential developments with sensitive planning requirements, helping to maintain the vernacular of our villages and towns as they are forced to grow or require maintenance. Since its formation in 2004, the business has seen continuous growth to a turnover last year of £16 million. There is very limited employment in and around Toppersfield, as my children have experienced, having both been educated at the village primary school and Headingham Secondary School. They are now both living and working in London. In a small way, I like to think that we have addressed this issue. We already employ 4 people from Toppersfield, 2 from Great Yeldon, 1 from Sybil Headingham, and 4 more living in the Braintree district area. And we are currently recruiting for another who looks like he was also coming from Toppersfield. I've lived in the village for 28 years, less than a mile from Toppersfield Hall Farm, and have no intention of leaving. I love the rural setting in which we live, and I believe we work in harmony with the village. Given my social life revolves around the village, it would clearly not be in my interest or my intention to create any problems at Toppersfield Hall Farm. We support our local community in many ways, including sponsoring the village cricket team, Sudbury Football Club, Saffron Walden Rugby Club and Earlscombe Recreation Club. I'd ask you please to take this statement into consideration when making your decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Osborne. Thank you. We have no one else wishing to make a statement on this application, so we'll go to the presentation, which is going to be made by Jack. Good evening, Jack. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, members. Just going to make this larger. So the application at Toppersfield Hall Farm is for the retention of the change of use of 2 agricultural buildings to storage and distribution use B8 use class, and the retention of 2 porter cabins to be used as offices associated with the use. So there are 2 aspects really to to look at here, and as I go through, I'll discuss these separately. So as you can see in the red line, there are two larger square structures in the southwest of that site. Those are the two structures that are due for the storage and distribution change of use. And the porter cabins you can see in the northernmost section of that red line, the two narrow structures. So the porter cabins have already been sited, the change of use to the storage and distribution has already taken place, so everything in this application is for the retention of. As a key, as we go through and a brief explanation, the two larger buildings, we'll refer to them as Building 1 and Building 2 as shown on this plan, and the porter cabins in the very north site. This is the plan that was brought forward and was at the time that the application was reported to committee, but during the interim and lead up, we had a discussion with the agent and we sought further assurances on aspects of landscaping and whatnot. You'll see that there are external storage areas that are marked, but if I show you the next plan, which is the revised plan submitted by the agent, you can see the landscaping that's existing is shown on this plan, and it's quite hard to spot, so I'll go back a slide, and if you look in the very south-west of the red line, it's hard to see, but the external storage area slightly moves off the boundary just to create more of a gap between the landscaping and the external storage areas. As you'll see when we move on to the recommended conditions, this is just so that we can be further assured that this landscape isn't going to be impacted and will be retained. In terms of elevations, there's no alterations or extensions to the building. They are exactly as they are now, just changing the use within. And this is the Building 2's elevation and floor plan. And these are the porter cabin elevations. So when I move on to photos, this will be easy to visualise. As viewed from the highway, on the right of that image you can see the porter cabins, and on the left you can see the front of Building 1. This is the highway landscape boundary. As you can see, it screens the development somewhat from the highway, so and it creates quite an important visual buffer in this rural area. And this is it further down the site towards the end of Building 2. And this is the field boundary from the southwest looking into the site. This is the facade of the building, Building 1, as you walk in. As you'll note, as I saw in my site observation, there are a lot of external materials stored quite neatly but also quite loosely around the site, hence why we sought further assurances as to where their materials are going and to what height they would be stored at. This central area here between the two buildings is one of the areas marked for external storage to a height no more of 2 metres. And this is the rear area of Building 2, where the other area of external storage is proposed. This is the flank of Buildings 1 and 2, and as you can see how the site interacts with what is the highway landscape boundary. This is the porter cabin that's currently in situ. A low-scale building tucked away against the wooden structures to its rear, and this is another view of those structures. So, just to recap then on them updated plans, the elevational drawings 1, 2 and 3 stay the same. The plan which didn't show the landscaping on that block plan has been superseded, and for the record, the plans that we would carry forward is Rev C, which showed that landscape buffer on the plans. There's been an update to the conditions accordingly because of the change of the plans and to seek further assurances. So on page 20, it might be easier to, of the agenda, it might be easier to follow through. But condition 2 has been changed to reference the plan for the avoidance of doubt, and it also states that it will only be used for the storage of building materials associated with the approved B8 use. As the speaker said, it's for building materials, it's mainly clay tiles, clay bricks, so building materials associated with that use is the revised wording. A new condition is recommended for condition 3. As stated in the report, the porter cabins are quite utilitarian in their appearance. Although they're providing a temporary solution, they're set against quite a considerable collection of wooden timber framed buildings. They're creating quite a simplistic industrial appearance of this site, and we have to remember we are in a rural area, so we do expect a more appropriate development to the countryside. So our recommended condition is that these porter cabin structures are removed as they serve a temporary solution at the moment, but they're removed within 12 months. Within that period, we would expect likely a new application to come forward for a better designed structure, which is more in keeping with the character of the site. So moving then, condition 3 becomes condition 4, and that just states that the material should be shown on the areas indicated on the revised plan. The parking layout, as shown on the revised plan, would need to be amended so it shows the highways recommended dimensions of 2.9 metres by 5.5 metres, and that can be provided to us by condition following this decision. A new condition 6 states that the landscaping that was shown in that revised plan shall be permanently retained, and that any trees that die, are removed, or become seriously damaged or diseased within a period of 5 years are replaced, because, as you can probably recall from the images, we've limited where the areas of external storage are, but if they don't have that landscape buffer, then the limits on height and the limits on areas are compromised somewhat, because they're effective because they're interacting with that landscape buffer, and also because it's a countryside area, we want to be retained in that sense of place in these rural areas. So we sought further assurances on retaining this landscaping. In the report, there is an indication of an update coming from the lead local flood authority. They updated to say they had no comment. So there is no real update in that regard. So then, to summarise, the principle of the development is acceptable, subject to the material considerations I've discussed. The change of use of the buildings is considered acceptable. The external storage area is acceptable, provided it's contained within them areas, and the impact on the countryside would not be unacceptable if done so, and that landscaping is retained. The porter cabins are acceptable as a temporary solution, and that's why the temporary permission reflects this. Landscaping should be retained as noted, and I also note there was no harm to nearby heritage assets, neighbouring amenities, and there were no unacceptable highways matters identified, and the parking plan would be provided by condition. So taking that into consideration and subject to those conditions, we would recommend that the application is put forward for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Sorry, I'm still making notes. Thank you. Members. Councillor Mrs. Beavers.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I'm more than happy to kick off on this one. So I'm just going through a couple of my notes. I was actually out on the site this afternoon, and wasn't a particularly clement day today. And first of all, I saw no flooding at all, and I know the area sort of quite well, so I'm quite convinced that there's not too many issues with flooding there. I mean, it is incredibly rural, agricultural setting, but actually it's looking quite regenerated along that road. I noticed that the hall itself is being improved, and you can't sort of drive through there and really notice this type of industry going on, particularly when we think about the turnover and the size of that business. And in fact, if you drive past and the hall is on your right and you look back, you can actually see quite a lot of parking around that porter cabin. But the cabin is very low, and I welcome the additional plans for the revision on the landscaping. But that said and done, you don't even look back, even when it is a bit more open, kind of, it doesn't look particularly sort of untidy or heavy industrial. I think the site has been really well kept. I'm obviously keen to hear from other members, but I would formally move the application, because I don't think there's too much not to like about this. I would just like a little bit of clarity around the porter cabin, and thank you very much, Jack, for your presentation. I appreciate they don't. I mean, although they have a long life, they don't look that great, and I appreciate they are low level, and it sits sort of softly behind that barn. But one would imagine that the planning application for something that isn't a porter cabin would have to come through quite quickly, wouldn't it? Because we wouldn't really want to see an enforcement coming out if we've only got a year on that. So it's quite important, I think, that that application comes forward. But all said and done, I can see from the presentation that the dialogue with the department has been good, and I see no reason why that shouldn't continue. So keen to listen from other members, but I would be also happy to recommend officers' recommendations. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
So you are moving the.
I am indeed, yeah.
Does that find a seconder before I move on? It does, Councillor Sri, and I've got you to speak next, and I come to you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Sri. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I agree with some of the comments from Councillor Beavis, and I think I just want to run through the fact that there's no statutory objections to this. It's actually no objection from the parish council, but it's actually supported, which is really good. This company is supporting local people. It's sustainable because it's also reducing the distance that needs people go to work. So it's filling lots of our criteria and our policies at Braintree District Council and with the planning as well. I'm very pleased to hear that the company is actually actively involved in our communities and supporting sports, which helps with all of our levelling up as well. I think that the terminology of it being an industrial building, all buildings can be industrial, obviously, especially this type. But I think this very much, for those that know the site, actually just looks like normal agricultural barns. So this is very much in keeping with the rural area. And the fact that it's providing so much employment as well is a real bonus. So I accept the comments about the porter cabins. It doesn't have any effect on heritage assets. The highways are all fine. So there's really nothing not to like about this, and everything to see the benefits of a rural, successful business in a rural area doing very, very well, supporting immediate communities as well as local employment. And I think it's a good example, and I'm very happy to second this as well.
Thank you. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. I'm often a little bit cautious about such uses in the countryside. So a lot of them in the ward I represent and nearby, which I think are inappropriate, where too much is trying to be done with farmyards, turning them into large-scale haulage businesses, for example. But in this case, I've got no problem about this, and I'm very happy to support it. Not least because the exact nature of the business, these type of materials are particularly important in our district, where we do have a lot of older properties. I live in one of them, where you do need to try and match bricks and slates and all the rest of it. So I think the actual nature of the business itself is really important. I was pleased to see the officer address 3 of the 4 questions I had. When I read the report, it didn't seem to quite match up with the conditions, but I think he's done that very well now, so I'm very happy with that. The only thing I wanted to query was cycling storage, and I will on the next application as well, where it's being said, well, we don't need to do that, even though policy says we should have cycle storage. And the comment, I think the comment the officer makes is something around, well, there's plenty of space on the site, but I'm just wondering what other members think about that. Are we setting a precedent, or should we be saying that, particularly thinking on a day like today, that we should have covered cycle storage? Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Did you wish to come back on that comment? That point, please.
Yeah, I believe with the site in general, I imagine we will be able to find space for the necessary parking, and we can include cycling. As noted, we will put forward a condition that requires them to submit a parking plan, and we as you say, the guidance talks about cycle storage, so an indication of where that will be. I'm sure there'll be space on site for cycle storage in some form or another, but we can cover that on the parking plan.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just looking at the policy in particular, I do think this application meets the terms of the policy, which generally both our own policy and national policy support rural businesses in provided a number of conditions are met, and they are that there is no unacceptable impact on the countryside, and I agree this is an existing building, and there is some landscaping around it. And obviously, it was an agricultural building. There used to be cattle there. But the main thing for me is the main condition which I find really is important in these sort of locations is the impact on the road network. And this particular road has 2 lanes all the way down to Great Yeldham. So I think actually it is quite an appropriate location for a rural business such as this. So I think it certainly meets policy. In terms of just the conditions, and thank you, Jack, for running through those conditions and those amendments. I think those are very appropriate. Just a couple of questions. So I know, the condition requires outdoor storage to be no higher than 2 metres. Well, some of that storage looked to me to be in excess of 2 metres. I'm just wondering whether we're being a bit picky about saying it shouldn't be higher than 2 metres. And the other thing was the actual the provision of a period of 12 months to submit revised. That those porta cabins can only be there for 12 months. Again, I'm just wondering whether I thought I'd read in the report, but I may have got that wrong, that you were considering a period of 3 years, which is the normal temporary period. But I just wondered if you could comment on the decision to choose 12 months for submitting a full application for revised buildings. Thanks.
So there was 2 questions with regards to the external storage. The 2 metres came from the applicant, from the agent, on their revised plans, and that was a number that we were more than satisfied with. With regards to 12 months, through internal discussion, we decided that was the best solution. We considered that there have been recent cases of note as well where a temporary, even if we're accepting that the porta cabins introduce a level of visual harm to the setting, which is our assessment, but if it's there for 3 years, that's potentially 3 years of that impact on the visual amenity of the countryside in our opinion. So we're more than happy to allow for it on a temporary solution and work quite closely with the applicant, to find a more positive solution. But we just felt that the 12 months was a appropriate solution.
I don't want that provision to detract from the sort of success of the business. That's my only concern. I mean, I do understand where we come from a point of view of then obviously not the most attractive things, but they are sort of slightly hidden behind a wall. And I did actually drive past the site the other day and didn't actually notice there were any porta cabins there at all. I've no idea how easy it is for the applicant to replace those with sort of more permanent structures. I just feel that a 12-month is a bit tight. I don't know what other members think.
Councillor Mann.
Where this has occurred in the past and an applicant has had difficulty, it's been customary to apply for an extension to a fixed period. I agree that a year is a bit mean because they don't appear to me to be particularly intrusive within a countryside. It'd be hard to spot them as you pass. I'd be perfectly happy to move, say, to 2 years if that had member support.
Councillor Mrs. Beavers, you moved the recommendation. I'll come back to you first.
I was just going to, thank you, Madam Chairman, just ask for clarity, because I think what we're saying is that a planning application would have to come forward. And once a planning application is agreed, as long as a planning application is there, then I think planning department, my understanding is, it makes it easier for you to be comfortable. So if we extended it, but wanted to see a planning application maybe within the year, that I'd be more than happy to see it extended, you know, because what we don't want is, as Councillor Parker said, is for the business to have to stop trading because there's an enforcement. That's the last thing we want for such a successful business. So I think, yeah, I would be happy for that extension too.
For 2 years?
For 2 years, yeah.
Right. You moved it. Are you seconded it, Councillor Swear? Are you in agreement with?
Yes, I'll second it.
Okay, fine. Tim, did you wish to make any comments before I?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I only to say that as officers we will always stick to the shortest time period as the starting point, because there are risks around temporary consents, but if members feel that a longer time is appropriate, I don't think we'd have any further comment on that in this case.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? Well, it has been moved and seconded that we grant this application with a change to the requirement for a planning application for the removal of new office buildings to 2 years from 1 year. And there are numerous updated conditions, which I presume you all agreed to, changing to condition 2, new condition 3, condition 4 was condition 3, and a new condition 6. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Thank you. Let now come on to application 5B, which is application number 2203229 full 9 Stepfield, Witham. Can be found on pages 24 to 41. We have no one wishing to make a statement on this application, so we'll go straight to the presentation, which is also going to be presented by Jack. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Chair. The next application is 9 Stepfield in Witham. It's for the demolition of an existing warehouse and the erection of a new warehouse. The application is cited within the Stepfield Industrial Park in Witham. For context, as you're looking at this location plan, I'll use my mouse here. The red line is the site area. The site immediately to the north here is also owned by the applicant, who's recently acquired the site to the south due to the fact that they've outgrown the capacity of the site to the north, and the site next door has become available for them to purchase. In doing so, they look to remove part of the structures within the application site to create this larger structure here on the right-hand side of this block plan. This is probably best to visualise by looking at the existing ground floor plan, followed by which is the proposed ground floor plan. Apologies for the title error there. As you can see, it's slightly larger in width and depth. Looking at the first floor plan and the proposed, and then going back and proposed again, you can get an idea of the total width and depth increase. In terms of numbers, the existing building is 18.5 metres in width with a 2 metre link in between the two existing structures. This would create an additional 5 metres in width, taking that structure to a total of 25.5 metres. Looking at the existing elevations and then comparing them with the proposed, you can see that the building is larger. It has more of let's say, an industrial appearance with the roller shutter doors and the metal sheeting across. However, as we'll see as we go through, it's in keeping with its locality. This is the existing building, which is due for removal by this application, proposed for removal. This is it viewed from a side angle. The building in the background there, which it's attached to, would be retained. This is the side flank, which would effectively be covered by the new building. And this is the existing building, which would be retained on the opposing side. This is it viewed from a wider perspective within the Stepfield Industrial Park, and this is it viewed a bit further back. So you can see that it's set almost at the conclusion as you drive through Stepfield. It's set at that end point of the industrial park with the existing premises where this signage is here on that right-hand side. In terms of the summary, it's an appropriate use within this designated employment area. It actually seeks to retain what it's currently used for. It's envisaged that it would interact with the larger premises which is currently in Site North, where the existing site would deal with larger joinery items, understand it's windows, doors, conservatory type construction materials, whereas the proposed warehouse would deal with smaller joinery items and allow for storage and distribution to and from that building. The design is acceptable and proposed materials for the replacement structure can be approved or is recommended to be approved by condition prior to above ground commencement. A condition is also recommended for a construction management plan. Stepfield's quite a built-up industrial park, and demolition and whatnot is likely to require some level of control, be it through the points that are referenced in the condition on page 37 through to 38, which includes how the construction would take place, and once the local authority would be assured that that's being undertaken in an appropriate manner, we would consent to that and it would adhere to the approved method. There are no adverse impacts to neighbouring amenities noted, and there were no unacceptable highways matters identified by officers or the local highway authority. The indicated parking on the plan is acceptable. It conforms to highways standards in terms of vehicle parking bays. And taking into account the current use and the proposed replacement use and how it would interact with the site, it's considered that the proposal complies with the development plan and it's moved subject to the conditions for approval by officers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As per the report, this is a very well established industrial estate in Witham. Members could see from the photos, and for those of us who know it very well locally, there aren't many environmental constraints. In fact, I don't think there's much living on there that's not human, which is a shame. But having said that, we are here to make sure that development is as sustainable as possible. So there are a couple of points I would like to make. One of which is I alluded to in the previous application, and I think I'll make the point stronger on this one. In the report, clearly at paragraph 11.3.3, it says that the calculation for parking would include 2 cycle spaces. And yet a couple of paragraphs further down, it says no formal cycling spaces are designated, but that it is recognised there are opportunities for cycle storage within the site. Well, again, we're not actually doing, I think, what we should be doing, which is specifically asking the applicant to provide for what is in policy terms should be there. And I think that's very important on the Witham Industrial Estate, because a lot of people do cycle to work. The actual connections into Witham and into the neighbouring areas for cycling are relatively good, particularly in that part. So I'm happy to move the officer recommendation, but with that as an additional, either include it in an addition condition or a new one, to make sure the cycling provision is there. The second point I would make is at paragraph 11.2.7, it says it's not considered there'll be any unacceptable pollution impacts. But of course we don't know that unless we control that which is controllable by us. This site backs immediately on to the Blackwater Rail Trail and then to housing. It's within a few tens of metres. The fashion at the moment on the industrial estate is to light these buildings with banks, huge banks of LED floodlights. If that happens and we don't have any planning control, there may well be environmental health complaints, which this council has to deal with via a separate stream of legislation. So the second condition I would add, Madam Chairman, is a lighting condition, both for the benefit of the residents, but for the fact that the Blackwater Rail Trail, which is basically like a tree corridor that runs behind there, is very likely to be a habitat for species, is also protected. But with those two additions, I'm happy to move acceptance. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Abbott. Let's find a seconder. You seconded it, yes.
Yes, I'm
Those
happy
are
to
two
second
new
it.
conditions.
Yes, and actually, interesting enough, I was going to talk about, raise a point about cycling as well, as I do think it is important in someone like Whittam. Are we able to, I mean, I'm happy to support Councillor Abbott's suggested amendment on that, but could we add the word secure, secure cycle storage, because obviously, unlike the previous application, I think the fact that cycle storage is secure is important. Yes, I'm also happy with both of the conditions that Councillor Abbott proposed, and I don't really have any other comments on Gemma.
Would you like them to be secure? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask a technical question of the officers? I mean, I agree with the comments about cycling storage, but I'm sure we've all noticed that there's a huge increase in demand and use of e-bikes and also e-scooters, especially in more urban. And I just wondered if there's an opportunity, or what our policy is when we're talking about cycle stalls, with the opportunity, and if it's going to be secure, whether there's an opportunity that we can also ask for them to be able to help and aid those people with e-bikes and the e-scooters going forward, because this is obviously long term. So I just wondered what our policy is, and is there anything that we can do about it?
Would you like to respond to? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a really interesting question, actually, not come up before. I don't think the current policy covers that. It's probably a discussion point that as officers we would need to take away. I don't feel confident saying that we've got a policy basis for it as of now. But I think it's something we would need to take away and discuss and look at going forwards. So, yeah, interesting question, but the answer is we don't have a current policy basis as of now.
Anyone else wish to add anything? Well, it has been moved and seconded that we grant this application with two new conditions. One, we're asking for lighting conditions, and the other is for secure cycle storage. All those in favour? That is also unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. We now come to the final application of this evening. Sorry, I've lost the page. Which is application 5C 2300247 full, land north of Preston Hall, south of the A12 veering, can be found on pages 42 to 64. We do have a speaker on this application who is joining us remotely, and this is Mrs. Evans, and she is speaking on behalf of the Ramblers Association. Good evening, Mrs. Evans.
Good evening.
Would you like to make your statement now, please?
Yes. My name is Catherine Evans. I'm the duly appointed Ramblers Joint Footpath Secretary for Braintree District. I refer to the comments, including photographs, made on behalf of the Ramblers on the 10th of March. From being an open aspect footpath, the path will become enclosed between the existing ditch and the proposed new fence. The plans appear to show the path on top of the ditch. The BDC officer report, whilst acknowledging the negative effect on the current open view from footpath 15, makes no comment to a width of 3 metres, no commitment to a width of 3 metres for this now enclosed path, as requested in the Ramblers' comments. The proposed treatment of this public right-of-way is not in keeping with the National Planning Policy Framework paragraph 100, which states planning policies and decisions should protect and enhance public rights-of-way and access, including taking opportunities to provide better facilities for users. Better facilities have not been provided, and this footpath has not been enhanced. Quite the opposite. Currently, footpath and ditch and hedge maintenance can be easily carried out from the adjacent open arable field. How will maintenance be carried out from the enclosed footpath? The location plan shows the future proposed maintenance access track for the mitigation area coming from the current A12 off-slip and the northern end of Prested Hall Drive. However, the route of the new A12 will sever this proposed access as can be seen from sheet 15 of the A12 DCO Street Rights and Way and Access Plans, which I've enclosed a copy, and I've added the mitigation area as green hatching. And the black line is the stopped up north end of Prested Hall Drive, so there's no access across the new A12. The officer report and proposed site plan state that the plateau area maximum level change will be up to 500 millimetres, 0.5 metres above existing ground levels. However, the plan shows the maximum height of the mound as 33.32 metres, with the height adjacent to the footpath shown as 31.62 metres, which is a height difference of 1.7 metres. This Site 1 soil is shown on the plan at the north-east of the site by the public footpath and not as stated in the report to the south of the site. On behalf of the Ramblers and for ease of future maintenance, a condition that the width of Fearing Public Footpath 15 shall be 13 metres between the ditch and the proposed fence is requested. Thank you.
Mrs. Evans, you said on your last sentence you said 13 metres. I think you meant 3 metres. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have no one else wishing to make a statement on this application, so we'll go straight to the presentation, which is going to be made by Melanie. Thank you, Melanie.
There we go. Sorry, members. Hopefully it'll be worth the wait. So the application before you this evening is for one of the ecological mitigation areas, which I'm sure you're all well versed in now. This is Area 17, which is to the south of the A12, but to the north of Prested Hall. And as with the previous applications that you've seen, that the ecological area will include ponds, bunds, and there is also an area of re-levelling of soil from within the site, and perimeter fencing, and then additional landscaping. So this is the application site. Along the top here, this is the A12, and then this is the slip road and the rather convoluted way of getting into Prested Hall at the moment. And then the large area here is where the proposed ecological mitigation will go, and then running parallel to the access the access route into the site is the main driveway that serves Prested Hall, and then a number of other properties that sit close to Prested Hall itself. So this plan here is the existing layout of the site. It is an agricultural field, and there is existing the access road that serves Prested Hall is quite well treed on both sides, and then along the bottom of the application site there is also a field boundary, and as has been mentioned by our speaker, there is a public right of way that runs along the north-east boundary of the site. So this is probably fairly familiar in terms of what's proposed on the site. You can see here we've got 3 ponds, various bunds and log piles, and we can also see the larger green dots of the new native trees that are proposed to be planted. You can also see on this plan here is, and also set out within the officer report in terms of the access track, and then the concerns that officers had about the close proximity of the tree belt and the hedge tree and hedge belt. And if you if you see along here, and then it then continues over onto that inset drawing, you can see that the tree protection area, which is the kind of the mauve purple text, does sit basically over the top of where the proposed access was, which is the concern that our heritage landscape officer had, and which is why we've reached the conclusion that that condition is then proposed in terms of limiting the use of that the access track, so that it can't then be used for construction vehicles. As far as we've been led to believe, we haven't had any further update, have we, in terms of the submission of a further application for a temporary haul road, but as far as we're aware, that will be coming in, and it will then be dealt with, because at present, were the application, if you were to follow and recommend as per set out within the agenda, the site, you wouldn't be able to access it for the construction vehicles. So we are expecting the temporary haul road application to come in as soon as possible. So the next few plans show you some of the details that are proposed. So these are some of the sections for 2 of the ponds. And then this is the 3rd one. And then this slide here shows you the fencing details to enclose the area. The next few slides show photographs. So I have included this photograph, even though this is not where we would now expect construction vehicles to actually access the site. But it's probably the part of the site that, if you have been to Prested Hall, you'll be most familiar with. So to the right of my car here is the main driveway, and you can just make out the starting of the hedge and the tree line, and then the actual application site sits down here. And then these photographs are taken looking, is a view from the north, so looking in a southerly direction. This portrait photograph here is of the position of the public right-of-way, and then you've got the landscape photograph here, which shows the public right-of-way to one side, and then the expanse of the application site to the right-hand side. There is one member update with regards to the wording for condition 6, which is the archaeological condition, and it's a small change in the wording, just requiring the post-excavation assessment and the updated design project to be submitted to the local authority for approval prior to any work starting on the site. So slightly different phraseology, but the gist of the condition is still the same. Turning to the comments made by Mrs. Evans, there were a couple of things that I just wanted to clarify. So I have remeasured the width of the amount of space retained for the public footpath, and it's roughly 2 metres for the entire length of where the fencing would be adjacent to the public footpath. And officers are of the view that that won't have a detrimental impact in terms of the use of that public right-of-way. There was also a comment made about the land levels. What I would do is go back to a previous slide. So on this slide here, there are some levels that are shown as existing and proposed. The 2 figures that were mentioned were for different parts across the site. So the land is lower along, it's a very gentle slope, but there is a change in levels across the site. And so the figures that were referred to was the existing land level across here and the proposed land level across here. And so whilst there would be a difference of 1.7 metres if you were comparing those, if you compared the proposed and existing in that location, it's only 600 millimetres, and in this location is 500 millimetres. Whilst those figures are correct in terms of the ones that have been quoted, they're not correct in terms of the existing and proposed in the same location. hopefully that makes sense, but happy to clarify further if needs be. There was also a question about the concern about maintenance of the public right-of-way, and I just wanted to make the point that would be the responsibility of Essex County Council and wouldn't be a matter for us at a district level to be involved in. There was also a query over the wider A12 widening works, and I just wanted to make the point that that isn't a matter that we're considering at this stage. We're considering this application on its own merits, and in terms of the wider works to do with the A12, that isn't a matter for your consideration this evening. And there was one typo that I just wanted to draw your attention to. Apologies for a typo error in my report. If you turn to page 54. Paragraph 12.2.3, the fourth sentence down, where there's, I think Mrs Evans referred to the fact that the report mentions that the re-levelling happens at the south of the site, and that should actually read the northeast, which is clear from the plan that's up on the screen at the moment. So apologies for that typo within the officer report. So I think they were all the comments I wanted to make in relation to the speaker. So I'll now go on to the last slide, which is the summary and recommendations. So the principle of development is acceptable and the loss of agricultural land is justified. There will be some landscape impact with the change in the character and would be seen from the public right-of-way. However, the officers consider the land level changes to be modest and not unacceptable. As discussed within the officer report and mentioned in my presentation, we do have concerns about the access for construction vehicles, and there is a condition recommended regarding the use of the access. There's considered to be no heritage harm, no significant ecological constraints, and any impacts can be addressed by mitigation. The soft landscaping scheme is acceptable and the biodiversity net gain is supported. There's no flooding or drainage issues and no adverse impact on neighbouring amenity. And therefore, taking into account the above, it's considered that the proposal complies with the development plan that's taken as a whole. Officers consider there are no material considerations that indicate that a decision should not be made other than in accordance with the development plan, and therefore a recommendation for granting permission is made as subject to the conditions set out within the agenda, and that slight revised wording for condition 6. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you. Members. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As the officers say, we're not here to debate the A12, but obviously this is about offset for the development of the A12. And one of the problems I have with all of these, actually, well, I'll vote for this tonight, is talk of net gain. How do you measure net gains? It's actually a very complicated thing to do. You've got to have the baseline of what's there now, and then you've got to measure it in, say, 5, 10, 20 years' time as to what you've got then. And over such a huge area as the A12 widening, which, by the way, along this section is not online, it's offline, so it's a new 6-lane road through the countryside, I would challenge any ecologist to demonstrate clearly there's been net gain, because you'd have to survey everything, down to insects and everything else. Obviously, there's net gain on this individual site, because you're going from basically an arable field to lots of complicated interacting habitats, what's called a good habitat mosaic, so I accept that point, but I just make the point on the wider scale, very difficult to measure that. It talks about loss of best and most versatile agricultural land, and we tend to get this in reports where it says, well, we've got a lot of it in the district, so losing a bit here doesn't matter, because is anyone keeping tabs on how much we're losing overall? I don't think we are. I don't think anyone, this authority or Essex, is taking account of the loss of productive agricultural land, which we need to grow food in this country, which is now going over to other things. That's not to say that individually some of those things are not beneficial. In this case it is. But just in the wider aspect, just the rate at which we're losing agricultural land in this district is, I would say, historically very, very rapid. In terms of gain, I did raise this on a previous one of these applications. At paragraph 1226, it's very confusing as to what it's saying there about new trees. It says new woodland planting, intermittent trees and 7 new individual trees. I can't make head nor tail from that how many trees are going to be planted or what species. And I remember I recall raising before, wouldn't it be really helpful on all our applications, have a table which said how many trees in total and what the species are. That would be really helpful, because I can't make head nor tail of that. How you can, in the one sentence, talk about planting woodland, but then 7 individual trees, because obviously a woodland is a lot more than that. I think the comments raised by the Councillor Evans on the public rights of way are very pertinent. Is there any way we can require a 3-metre swathe, or is that just too complicated in terms of what the applicant's putting forward? I just raised that question, although I think I do take the point about the height levels, that's not such a significant issue. Other than that, I'm happy to support, but that was sort of my one question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Did you wish to answer?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Fire Tim, I will, yes.
Yes. In answer to your question, we've measured it, and we're confident it's 2 metres. Requiring 3 would be pushing out beyond where the existing public right-of-way runs into the farmland, and from the planning perspective, we don't have the ability or justification to do that. So I think our primary concern was, is the existing prow being affected and bits being taken off it? We're confident from Mel's measurements that it's not. So I don't think there's any way we could then expand that. I think these photos show it quite well. At the 3-metre mark, you'd be out into the field there. And we have also considered the fact that Essex County Council have powers if people obviously developers try and block the path. They've got the power to stop that. So from the planning perspective, we're confident that's covered.
Anyone else? Oh, Councillor Mrs. Parker, sorry.
Yes, I just wanted to pick up on a couple of points Councillor Abbott's made, actually. I mean, I sort of do agree that a slightly wider footpath would be better for the users of the footpath, but I think that's not something that we can deal with. I accept that's not something that is within our control. I think it's a question of trying to negotiate that. The Ramblers trying to have a conversation with the applicant to see if they can just agree to slightly widen footpath, possibly. But I just wanted to pick up on the point about the agricultural land loss. I mean, I think the major sort of objection or negative aspect of all these applications is the loss of best and most versatile land, and this is classified, I think, as Grade 2. And if you look at the agricultural land maps for the whole of the UK, you will see that there's this very small area of Grade 1, which is basically the fens. And then all the Grade 2 land, nearly all Grade 2 land is in East Anglia, and only small, sort of relatively small parts of East Anglia. So I mean, it is a valuable resource for growing food, which is what it is, for the whole country. So I mean, I completely accept that in this particular case, I think it is probably outweighed by the damage to the ecology that's going to be done by widening the A12, and that's a mitigation measure. It's acceptable, but I just think we do need to bear in mind the importance of land to grow food on. Not all land can grow, good crops. So I think it is a valid point the Councillor made. But otherwise, I'm happy to. I don't think it has been second. Has it been moved?
No.
Well,
You did move it, did you? I'm sorry, I didn't realise you said I'm happy with it. You didn't say I'll move it. Sorry. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to second the application. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to add anything else? No. Well, it has been moved and seconded that we grant this application with a slight change to condition 6. All those in favour? That is also unanimous. Thank you very much, members. That brings us to the end of our planning applications. I have no urgent business, so I will close the meeting at 14 minutes past 8. Thank you very much.